Night school.
Night school. So you're doing a series on social justice.
What? What was the last one I even did?
You said every episode that you do from now on is going to be like raising awareness for marginalized people.
I don't recall saying that, but I'm sure there's a video of it somewhere. Yeah. Today we're going to be talking about Geoffrey Cain's The Perfect Police State, an undercover odyssey into China's terrifying surveillance dystopia of the future. This is a book about the current situation that you may have heard of about the Uyghur Muslims in China. The Uyghur Muslims, what they are like native Chinese. So they're like a group of people that has lived there for a very long time. They're the equivalent of like the Native Americans here. And they live in an autonomous zone called Xinjiang. And that is like it is like a state of China where they kind of rule themselves for the most part, or at least they used to when that was originally enacted. So it's like a reservation for them, but it's big and it's all sort of one state. And they have been recognized as like a group that can kind of govern themselves for most of the history of China. Since the things started changing on 9/11, basically, well, China really, in my opinion, China just wants to get more and more control over everybody in their country. Whether they are minorities or just regular Chinese people. And I would say that they seized the opportunity that 9/11 gave them in order to start locking things down in the name of safety, in much the same way that we did. So at 9/11, at that point, there started being more discussion about religious extremism and about how to be about being careful of Muslims. But the region has a lot of oil, and they were very successful throughout from 2001 to 2010, something like that. They did very well financially. And
you heard about this group of Uyghurs?
Talking about the Uyghurs, yeah. In the Xinjiang Autonomous Zone.
And do you know, is there multiple reservations like that, or is this just the one autonomous zone?
As in for
Uyghurs in China?
This would be it. Yeah,
okay.
This is, well, I could be wrong in that. But my understanding is that all of the Uyghur minorities are in the Xinjiang Autonomous Zone. There was, from 2010 to 2014, there were a few Muslim-based terrorist attacks in China. And because of those, they started locking things down more and more and releasing more and more propaganda that was sort of like anti-Muslim fear-mongering. In 2014, they started making it so that people basically couldn't even wear... they started demonizing beards and demonizing any women wearing veils or any sort of face coverings. Those are very much demonized at this point. Any sort of beards you pretty much can't have in China.
Really?
It's considered like a Muslim trait and something that you shouldn't have because that's kind of an extreme thing. The author of this book, Geoffrey Cain, is a journalist who has written for a lot of different newspapers, and he's written one other book. It was called Samsung Rising, just about the company and its sort of apparently very interesting history of how they got as powerful as they are now. He specializes in writing about Asia and the Middle East and technology and authoritarian states in a lot of cases. He writes about North Korea a lot.
Sounds like the guy for the job.
Yes. And he's a very bold man and very willing to put himself in some danger. So in researching this book, he interviewed 168 people that had inside knowledge of what is going on and what was going on with the Uyghur Muslims in China. Mostly Uyghur refugees, either in Turkey or in Egypt or in the United States. There's a few different places that they end up. But also people that worked for the Chinese government that had inside knowledge of how things were going. He even interviewed a guy that was a Uyghur Muslim who was hired by the company that created this sort of techno prison that they're living in. He helped create this machine that is now kind of surveilling and controlling and guiding the lives of all of these people. That company, by the way, is called Skynet, the system that they built in order to control everything. Skynet, if you don't know, is the same company that is the start of the robot revolution in Terminator. It's the company that ends up running all of the Terminators.
That's so creepy.
I don't know why. It's weird that things like that happen.
Mm-hmm.
Where like
Didn't
real...
they do that with Orwell too in China? They named something Orwell.
Not to my knowledge. Did I say something about that at some point?
No. Would you mind looking up, Evan, if China named a creepy technology after Orwell or 1984? I think one of their facial recognition programs or something. So, but he'll pull that up in a minute.
Okay. It's very possible, and that is such a weird thing that happens, where like companies name things after spooky things, like after villainous companies or objects in like fictional works.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what's up with that. I don't know why they do that, but it seems to happen a lot.
If you had to guess, do they do it as a joke and a middle finger? Or do they do it to get in front of the criticism and acknowledge the similarity?
I imagine it's I imagine it's like a joke. I imagine it's like it's a bit, and it also, I guess, it makes anybody who suggests that like, oh, you're just saying that because you're thinking of Terminator. You're acting like this is something like from Terminator. It's just the same name. Like, how many words are there? You know. I bet it's something like that. I don't know. So he interviewed a lot of people and decided that he did actually want to go to Xinjiang himself. He was heavily advised against it. He was told that he would be in a lot of danger. He met with like some sort of U.S. diplomat in Beijing, I believe it was, and she told him like, don't go there. Like, they'll arrest you. You're fucked if you go there. But he went there anyway. He went there and basically pretended to be a backpacker. He bought a phone in China and was going to use it as like a burner phone to take pictures and just take pictures of all the weird stuff that's going on. One day he was in I believe it was Kashgar, which is one of the major cities in the Xinjiang region. And in Kashgar, this was in 2017, he saw a drill going on in the street where there's 3 big police officers in SWAT outfits, bulletproof vests, and they've got batons, and they're in front of a bunch of shop owners. So they're in like a sort of a market area, and they've got all the shop owners out, and they've given them wooden batons, and they're running them through a drill on what you do if you see a terrorist. And they say, see a terrorist? Strike a terrorist! And they're like play fighting, and like they're like doing like a thing and then like hitting like fake terrorists. Just like a pretend drill. And he looks at it and he takes a picture of it casually and then tries to just walk off and is immediately surrounded by police. He said like it felt like they just kind of appeared. But one of them was wearing sunglasses with like a camera attached to it and with like a screen on it, hooked up to a computer in his pocket. He's got like a mini computer in his pocket. So they've got some kind of database that he's accessing and either sees that this guy is not on the database or sees that he is on the database and he's a journalist and we need to be careful of this guy. They end up arresting him and they take him in for questioning, and they ask him like, what are you doing? Are you a spy? What is this about? And he says, they look at his passport, and on his passport, there's several places on there. There's Egypt, Turkey, and a few other places. And they're like, you've been to all these places. What's this about? And he says, I'm a business consultant, and I'm just here backpacking right now. They make him delete all the photos on the phone, and then they let him go. But they tell him to go back to his room. So he goes back to his room that night, and I remember him saying that he just felt, even though he couldn't pinpoint exactly why, he constantly, the whole time he was in Xinjiang, felt that he was being watched, even when he was in his private room. Mm-hmm. It's entirely possible that they've got hidden cameras in all of the hotel rooms. Mm-hmm. At this point in the streets, the cameras are everywhere. There's no blind spots. They've got a camera system They've got a camera on every corner, make sure they get an angle of every possible place that someone could be outside. Wow. And they're probably doing similar stuff inside as well.
Mm-hmm.
When he was arrested by them, he was lucky enough to not be caught for this, but he had a watch on. It was not a watch, and it was actually an audio recording device. He was wearing like a spy watch to get audio of everything that was going on.
Damn.
Which he luckily got away with. He mentioned that the day after he was arrested, he went to a restaurant, like a Western-style restaurant, where he had a Western breakfast. But on the TVs in the restaurant, there was an anti-Muslim propaganda film playing. And it's just really dramatic stuff. Like, there was a scene where a terrorist was at a mosque, and he was praying for the death of innocence. He's praying for the death of innocence, and then there's shots of just like guys in turbans in the desert yelling Allah and shooting guns, shooting AKs up into the air, and then like the Twin Towers following, and just
Jeez.
A hodgepodge of propaganda images of anti-Islam stuff.
And the point of those drills was not to prepare anyone on any practical level for anything, but just to tell everyone, hey, could you please be afraid that you'll be attacked by a Muslim? That's why they were doing drills with the store owners.
I think they might be pretty liberal with who they're willing to attack. Like, they might. I don't know that anybody's really attacking terrorists in the street. Because, like, the way that you... A terrorist is pretty broadly defined there right now. Like, you need to tip off the cops if you see someone with a beard. Like, you need to tell someone about that beard that you saw, because that's likely a religious extremist.
Whoa.
It's like that. So he sees this propaganda film, which ends with this in Mandarin: "Love the country, love the party." So it's like all this like anti-Islam stuff, and then love the country, love the party.
The party.
The party.
It's not a party if there's only one.
It's a big party.
The party.
it's a very big party. Everyone's in it. Or you're a terrorist. Damn. So he ended up getting arrested a second time. 2 days later, I was detained for taking photographs. I decided it was time to leave, so he got arrested a second time, and then after that decided to get out of there. My next step was Cairo, Egypt, where a Uyghur contact told me exiled Uyghurs were being hunted down and deported back to China. As I boarded a flight for Cairo, I loaded up a list on my computer that a contact in China had sent me. 75 behavioral indicators of religious extremism. He told me police in Xinjiang were handing out the list, advising citizens to be suspicious of certain behaviors that might indicate people were terrorists. Following are some of the warning signs. People who store large amounts of food in their homes. Those who smoke and drink but quit doing so suddenly. Those who buy or store equipment such as dumbbells, boxing gloves, as well as maps, compasses, telescopes, ropes, and tents without obvious reasons. So just any sort of effort to build yourself up, that's terrorism. Any effort to change your habits, your consumption habits, that's terrorism. Any, if you have maps or tents, or if you're interested in being outdoorsy, why would you need to do that? Everything's taken care of for you here. Why would you need to be prepping or going out in the woods? That's silly.
So what
are you hiding?
What they're really saying with this list is, here's a memo of things that you shouldn't do because we'll suspect you, and so will your neighbors because they got this list also.
Absolutely. Yeah. That is what it is. So he goes to Egypt, and he meets with a bunch of Uyghur contacts there. One story that he told was meeting with it was two brothers that were refugees from China, and they were being hunted down by the Egyptian government to be given back to China. The reason that that's happening, a lot of the way that China's got a lot of money, and they're pulling death traps on people. So with Egypt, it was a part of this thing called the One Belt, One Road initiative. I don't know everything about it, but it's a trade plan. It's a plan to make this sort of this pathway throughout Asia and into Europe of easy trade, and they're going to have some kind of railway or something. I don't know. but they made some kind of deal with Egypt to like get a certain amount of land in order to be able to put their road through there. And they understand that like Egypt won't be able to pay for it. So instead they just put things in the contract. Like if you can't pay for it, then we can be repaid either with land or with access to resources. And there would be an expectation that you guys would be cooperative with our police force for any terrorists that we need to track down. So China can just say to Egypt, these people are terrorists, you need to track them down and get them to us as we agreed. And they are using that term very liberally, and Egypt is absolutely cooperating. So they're pulling debt traps in order to strong-arm other countries into helping them.
Good thing we're not falling into any sort of debt trap with China.
Yeah, we would never take money from them.
Man, the heart of the free world. If we fell.
Yeah. So he meets with a lot of other other Uyghur refugees, and a lot of those stories I'm going to skip over. The main one that I want to tell is about a woman named Mazum, who is talked about a lot in the story. Mazum is from Kashgar, one of the major cities in Xinjiang. Mazum is a young woman. He met her in 2017. It sounds like she's somewhere in her mid-20s, maybe closer to 30, something like that. She lived in Kashgar her whole life. She's been a Muslim her whole life. It's her culture. And her mother, her upbringing, her mom and dad. Her mom is an intelligent woman who is open-minded and thoughtful and encourages Mazum to be the same way, to like be thoughtful and to educate yourself and to build yourself up. Her dad is a company man. Her dad is like he's a total party member. He toes the line for whatever it is they want to do. There's a story of like when they were going to get married, she didn't want to marry this guy, but her dad insisted that she needs to marry him because of his close relationship with the party and the fact that like he's a respectable man in the party, so like you need to do this. And growing up, like there's a story of her grandpa, her mom's dad, although he was encouraging of being with this guy, he's also a very knowledgeable man, has a lot of books, and at one point she had brought home some books from her grandpa's house, and her dad burned the books and told her that like knowledge is dangerous, books are dangerous.
Wow.
And probably like in a way he's right. In a way it is true.
Yeah, dangerous to you, asshole.
Well, it's dangerous to him. I don't want to portray him as like necessarily. He's not absolutely villainous, I would say. He's not a decision maker in the party. He's just a man who is going to do what the party says. And he's going to, let's just do what we're told and we're going to stay on this road. Mm-hmm. There is times where he shows that he very much loves his daughter. And like she doesn't doubt that about him. But he's not willing to step out of line. He's going to obey whatever orders the Chinese government gives him. Mm-hmm. So she grew up. And she was a young woman when things started getting really intense where they are now. In 2014, I'm guessing my read on the situation is that in 2014 she's like around 20, something like that. And she's pursuing higher education, which her dad very much pushes against, says that she shouldn't do anything like that. You should just be a good school teacher, because that's kind of the job track, is if you're a woman and you don't pursue any further education, which the vast majority do not, you end up being a school teacher. But being a school teacher there is not being like an educated person. It's not being a thoughtful person.
You're just delivering curriculums, huh?
You're delivering the propaganda, whatever it is they want you to say.
Yeah.
And
what did she want to go to school for?
Social sciences. He doesn't go into specifics on this.
Right.
I should say that some of the information is deliberately vague about the timeline of her life. Mm-hmm. Most of these people that he's meeting with are on the run from the Chinese government.
Right.
And the Chinese government is going to read this book, and they're going to try and suss out who these people are specifically. So their pseudonyms and the timelines are obscured, And
so on a minute detail like this that doesn't relate to the point of the book, it could say social sciences because she wanted to go into chemistry.
It could. It could not even be a social science.
Right.
Yeah. But that is what it's referred to as. Social sciences is what she's pursuing. And her mom is encouraging about it, and she ends up getting extremely good test scores. Like they test everyone in Xinjiang, and she's one of the highest scores on these tests.
Mm-hmm.
So she ends up going to Beijing for a time, pursuing education there, and then she, in order to get her master's degree, she's traveling to Turkey, which is a nearby country, and she's doing college there. So when things are getting more and more weird over the last few years, she's in and out of the country. She's not there the whole time. She doesn't see everything. She's kind of coming back and sometimes seeing sort of leaps forward in terms of how much control they're flexing now. So in 2014, she sees like the veil and beard bans go into effect. Those started, by the way, as like at first it was, well, of course we're not banning those. It's just going to be if you're at a big sporting event, we can't have anyone with veils or beards because of the fear that it will cause. And then it got more and more very quickly to the point where like veils are not allowed, beards are not allowed. Those are terrorist things. We all know that. Come on. In 2016 is when a man named Chen Quanguo, who is a high-ranking official in the Chinese Communist Party, he took over the Xinjiang area, and he announced his new plan to create a safe city in Kashgar. And that, of course, rolled out quickly to other cities as well. Here's what safe cities are like.
You're always at ease when politicians are preaching safety.
Yeah.
You always know things are going to go great.
Yeah. Propaganda ramps way up. There's billboards of like miserable, angry, dangerous, dirty, scary looking Muslim people. And then regular, I refer to them as Han Chinese people that are happy and modern and just like bopping around the city, all happy-go-lucky. So there's a lot of that. All Uyghurs have to have ID cards, and they are checked by the police frequently. There ends up being convenience stations, as they're referred to, police convenience stations all over the place. And every time you walk past one, they're going to grill you and ask you where you're going and what you're doing. And they're going to check your ID.
Well, it's convenient.
It's very convenient. There's these things called Wi-Fi sniffers. They're like they're like routers that they've got set up all over the place that just like are constantly pinging every phone that goes by, so they can map out basically like where everyone is going constantly with these Wi-Fi sniffers. And that's just, they're just all over the place, so they know where people are. The police ramp up, so like just all the men, like I said earlier, sort of the track for women is you become a teacher. The traditional track for men is you become a cop. And there's more and more cops coming in because they want to have more and more control over the situation. The cameras, that's when the cameras start going up everywhere. It was in 2016 when they're doing this Safe City project. It started just like cameras on light posts and street corners and stuff. And then over the course of a year, there was just thousands of them everywhere. There's cameras everywhere. You are never not being seen by the eye of Skynet.
Because all these cameras feed into AI.
Yes. So this whole thing runs on technology. This whole thing wouldn't be doable without technology. And for a long time, when they were trying to build this technological system, this Skynet system, in order to make it function, there had to be people at security cameras that were like watching and like reporting things to police and sending police. That is not very efficient, and they ended up phasing it out when they got a sufficiently powerful AI, which there's a whole story in here that is very interesting, but I don't know it well enough to go into all that. But there is a very interesting story about the tech and how that developed. But they build this very powerful AI system that makes decisions on who is a threat and when, and dispatches police.
So the AI calls the police on people.
Yes.
Whoa.
It's a robot system that's calling the police on people. It uses predictive policing, meaning it predicts who is going to be likely to commit a crime based on factors that no human even knows, because this machine is learning and making decisions on its own. And it's getting smarter over time, and nobody really understands, which is also a benefit to the party, in that if nobody understands what this thing knows and how it works...
No one's accountable for what it does.
No one's accountable, but also that sort of unknown of like what things are going to trigger it, that makes people more in line. That makes people less willing to do anything.
Because if you don't know what the criteria is, you can't play within those boundaries and do your thing. You just go, whatever, I'm just going to fall in line because I don't even know what it's judging me on.
Yeah, you just look straight and like, don't do anything weird. Don't do anything interesting. Go home and go to where you need to go, and that's it. They implement this system called unit chiefs. A unit chief is a government neighborhood watch, basically. In Mazem's block or unit of 10 houses, they're broken up into units. All the houses are broken up into units of 10 houses.
They all have the same amount?
That was what it said, but it could be that, I mean, I'm sure there's some variation to that maybe in some areas. But in her block, there was 10 people. And there's a woman named Miss Gurr, who is the unit chief. And her job is to go around every morning and every night to each house and to check on each person and to ask them how they're doing and if they have seen anything suspicious among their neighbors. These people are expected, Mazem is expected to keep tabs on the 9 other houses. So people are like peering out windows to look at all the other houses in the block to keep an eye on what's going on with them, to see if there's anything suspicious, because that way they can report it to Miss Gurr. Now, the reason people are so willing to be a narc about this and to narc on their neighbors is because if another neighbor says, oh yeah, that person didn't leave the house today, and you didn't say it, then you are either not paying attention or you're covering for them. So it's a system where like you have to narc, because if someone else narcs and you don't, then you are culpable. Then you are the problem. And the person that did the nothing thing that happened, they're also a problem.
Wow.
So it's a complicated narking system. And there's this woman that goes around, I'm sure some of them are men, but Miss Gurr goes around every day and checks and asks people about like what was reported to her about them that day. One example, Mazem doesn't go to school one day or doesn't go to work one day. And Miss Gurr shows up and asks her the next day, I was told that you didn't go to work yesterday. Why is that? And she said, I'm sick. I have the flu. And she goes, do you have a doctor's note to prove that? And she goes, no, I don't feel good. I didn't go to the doctor. And she's like, you need to go to the doctor and get this certified. And so she has to like go see a doctor to get a note to give to Miss Gurr that, yes, I am sick. Because her neighbors narked on her to say that, yeah, she didn't leave the house yesterday. I don't know what's going on.
Jeez. How the hell do you even notice whether or not your neighbor leaves the house?
Because you are peering out the windows, because you're listening for cars and you're watching to like see, because you need to, because it's your job to now.
Holy cow.
Because if you don't, then Miss Gurr is going to get mad at you. And if Miss Gurr gets mad at you, then things get really bad. She's always very friendly and cheerful, though. She's never
good.
Yeah. She's
Thank
always
God,
very
she's a good attitude.
Oh, you didn't go to work. Oh, well, you're going to need to go. Of course, you'll need to see a doctor and get that certified. I can't just have you doing that. There's a QR code at everyone's front door. So when Miss Gurr checks on them, she beep and then moves along. So she has to scan to verify that she's been to each house. And the QR codes are there.
Oh, whoa.
Yeah. An example of like one thing there's things that'll end up triggering this system are like, it also tracks your purchases, because everyone's pay system is connected to their phone via their WeChat app. WeChat is an app that like every Chinese person uses. It is the Facebook Messenger. It is the social media. It is the Tinder. It is the Uber. It's like it's all the apps ripped off, kind of packed into one, and it's all absolutely controlled by the Chinese Communist Party.
Wow.
And so they have full access to all the information about everything that you're doing. And so they keep track of your purchases, and they know everything you buy based on that, and also based on the cameras that they have and the Wi-Fi sniffers that keep track of your location at all times. If you buy what it deems to be too much beer, or based on that other thing, too little beer, if you typically drink beer, then that's a problem. Then that's going to trigger it.
If you suddenly stop drinking beer, it'll get triggered.
Yeah. I mean, I'm assuming that based on what we read earlier. Yeah. Right. If you're late for work, that's going to be a conversation with Miss Gurr. Just any sort of change in your behavior is either a conversation with Miss Gurr or with the police. So people stay very much in line and just do exactly what they always do.
Right.
That's the best way to be safe. Keep your head down and do what you always do. Religion at this time is being demonized more and more. And I don't think that this is about Islam. I don't think it's about Muslims. I think it's about religion. I think it's about God. I think it's about spirituality. I think it's about the fact that any faith in something outside of this world is power lost by the Chinese Communist Party.
Mm-hmm.
They want the Chinese Communist Party to be everything to you.
Mm-hmm. And they single out the Uyghurs because the Western world won't go over there and fuck their faces for going at the Uyghurs, right? Or at the Muslims.
Maybe.
Like, it's the Muslims are the group that you can bully the most without the free world, the Western world,
maybe
shooting you.
Yeah, and I suppose they had the best argument to start there because they had a big group of Muslims, and I don't know if they have a big group of Christians to go after.
In China or in the Uyghur community?
In China. I mean, I don't know if they have like a similar area that is Christianized that way.
There's like booming underground Christian churches in China, but there's not. Yeah, I don't think there's like a Chinese city or like a Christian city in China.
So I think they started with Xinjiang because it's convenient because they are all in one place. It's a religion that is easy to demonize compared with other ones.
Mm-hmm.
There's very easy propaganda films that you can make. And it was, that's just a good place for them to start.
I also wonder, so yeah, they just want to take over, they want all of China to work like that, right? So they're going, well, if we pick these people, they're the easiest targets, the world is less likely to empathize with them, blah, blah, blah. They're supposedly from, 2007 to 2014, you said something about there was like a bunch of Muslim terrorist attacks in China?
Like I can't remember when the start of the framework that he referenced, but he talked about like 4 different terror attacks that were Islam based in China.
So were those fake?
It is entirely possible, and he doesn't entertain that at all.
Although that is not the point of the book.
Yeah, he doesn't entertain that, at least in the book. But it was certainly on my mind when I read this. Like, well, this
is the Nation of Islam really going over there? Oh, we're going to take over China. What?
The message would be that they were, not that they wanted to take over China, but that they wanted independence from China.
Oh. Because China is like choking them on debt traps overseas and mistreating their people in their borders.
Seizing control more and more. Yeah. And I think that's what they present it as.
Mm-hmm.
But it is absolutely possible that those attacks were staged by the Chinese Communist Party, or some of them. I mean, real terror attacks happen, but also they are very convenient in order to push a narrative forward.
Right. But that's another book.
Yeah. By 2016, 70% of mosques were demolished. So at this point, there is likely none. They've probably gotten rid of all of them. Many of the mosques that remained were closed to the public. There was a description of one mosque that Mason went to.
They set up police stations in them?
No, it was just closed, and it said, there was a sign written like across the door that said, Do not let them pray. I don't know what that means. Like, it's kind of odd phrasing, but on the door was a sign saying, "Do not let them pray."
That sounds like a quote from the manual that the Chinese government uses in private. That's titled "How to Take Over Everybody in Your Country."
Yeah, like
doesn't it?
Yeah, it sounds like instructions on like what to tell the local government to do.
Right.
But it is weird that it's written on the door like that. But
right.
Yeah.
But it could be like it could be one of those things like naming it Skynet. Like one of those things that's like, oh, by the way, this is what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, just almost like when Jim Carrey goes on Kimmel and he puts up the Illuminati sign.
Yeah.
And the Illuminati sign, for those who haven't seen it, like it's he does a triangle over the mouth and then sticks his tongue out through the triangle, and it looks like we run the world and ha. Yeah. And so like it seems like that's kind of what those things are like.
Very well made.
There's these symbolic things that are like, we run the world, and you can't do anything about it. And we want you to know that this is what we're doing.
Yeah. At another mosque that Mason visited, it was like the mosque was open and there was people in there, but it was sort of you were not supposed to pray there. You're not allowed to pray there. It's just like they were just treating it like a kitschy, like, oh, come check out this kind of interesting old architecture. Like, whoa.
They're treating it like a museum, just to say, by the way, this is the grave site of your faith.
Right. So the Chinese government is instead of like allowing these mosques to stay open, they're treating them like a tourist site. And like, you can come look at this, but it's desecrated now and you can't pray there. Mazem at one point in an interesting story of her just being like a bold rebel bitch, went in there like wearing a veil and sat down and prayed until the cops yelled at her to get out of there. But she like just went in there just to be a rebel.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome.
So what also is going on at this time, overnight, they've got construction crews that are coming and they're putting up fences around neighborhoods. So they're making caged/gated communities of people so that there is like a police checkpoint in order to get into your neighborhood.
Damn.
And she said that like these would literally pop up overnight. Like they would work all night and you would wake up and like, whoa, like you're in a gate now.
So part of that psychologically, just to say, hey, just so you know, you might wake up to new control measures. We don't even have to tell you.
Yeah. And we can lock you in. We can lock you in at any time.
Wow.
Yeah. The government started requiring people to install an app on their phone called Citizen Security, which is a great app that allows you to alert the government if you see something scary, like a man with a beard. Like that's really recommended. If you see anyone with a beard, go on the Citizen Security app and report it immediately.
So much of this is just to instill the idea of a threat in the minds of every single citizen.
Sure. Yeah. It's to create as much fear as possible. And it doesn't even matter if you enforce it that heavily, because it's just the fear of the possibility is enough.
Mm-hmm.
Kids in school are, of course, being taught propaganda and are being told about all the positive things about the Chinese Communist Party. And they're told by their teachers to go home and tell their parents about it. And if your parents say anything negative about it, let me know. If they say anything, if they disagree or they argue, you let me know. So teachers are turning children into narcs on their parents, which, by the way, I read 1984 a few months ago, and that is exactly what happens in 1984. Like all the kids become like, parents fear their children because kids will end up becoming like super gung-ho about the party, and then it's like dangerous to express any sort of idea around them.
Dude, shit like that makes me think, why did we ever decide to let the government be the teachers of our kids? True. What are we even doing with like a mandated public education system? Like, fuck.
I bet that starts from like the idea that we need to standardize education because many kids are being left behind. So if we create some sort of a system with similarities across a big area, then like that would make sure that no child gets left behind.
Right.
I imagine that was a lot of it, but yeah, it's no good.
An equity attempt.
Yeah. People were often told during certain periods that we are now doing essential travel only, and the police, on their own judgment, will decide whether your travel is essential or not. At grocery stores, there's 2 lines, one for the Han, one for the Uyghurs. So, it was described that like the Uyghurs, they know the cameras are watching them at all times, so they're either stone-faced or happy and just like, this is good. It's good.
They have fake smiles on their face in public.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my god.
Well, I mean, why wouldn't mean fake? I mean, everything's so good. I'm so safe.
You're so secure.
I feel so safe and happy, and this is wonderful that I have all this bountiful food here.
And no beard.
God. Knife salesmen. If you bought a knife from a Cutco guy, or from anyone, if you buy a knife from the equivalent of Walmart, from a store, they etch a QR code into that knife. This knife is now linked to your ID. Any knife that you own is linked to your ID. And this is to make sure that no one will attempt to pull some sort of terrorist attack with a knife.
And I'm thinking guns are out of the question.
There's no guns. There's not a gun mentioned in this book.
Not a Second Amendment type of deal over there?
There was not even a guard with a gun. Nobody ever has a gun in this book. The guards have big ass rubber batons with spikes on them. But they're like rubber spikes, so they don't like break the skin, but they like still beat the shit out of you.
Thank God they're safe.
Thank God they're safe. Frequently, the language that is often used are, if anybody is being suspicious, they're told that they have a mind virus or terrorist thoughts that they need to get rid of.
Mind virus.
Mind virus, yeah. The 3 evils that are often, like a big part of the propaganda is the idea of the 3 evils. I'm going to pull this up here.
Terrorism, extremism. I just read it.
Oh, okay.
No, I was bullshitting with the book before we started. But I can't remember the
gotcha.
anymore.
This is something she is forced to repeat at one point. The 3 evils are terrorism, separatism, and religious extremism, Mason dutifully declaimed. They're like forced to repeat these things.
How separatism when like they're not talking about segregation apparently?
I believe by separatism they're referring to separating from the Chinese government. This would be like the equivalent of the Confederacy in the United States wanting to secede from the United States.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the 3 evils. They have a project. They have a program that has now gotten bigger and bigger. It was told at first that it was going to be just a quick experiment that we would do, but it's now become a much bigger thing. It is called the Becoming Family Program. It's a way to help blend the Han and Uyghur populations by sending government employees to live in your home with you.
What?
Including, like, as your husband. Meaning, like in some cases, there are Han Chinese men that work for the Chinese Communist Party. They might be put in your home. If your husband is taken away, they might be put in your home as your new husband, which you must obey.
Holy shit.
Yeah. Becoming family. Isn't that wonderful? Police checkpoints are everywhere. They're on every fucking corner. In 2016, Mazem was summoned by Miss Gurr to go speak with the police. Her and her family were all to report there for their fun new program, Physicals for All, which was run by police, not by medical technicians. They took DNA. They took faces, meaning like, okay, smile. All right, frown. Okay, surprised. And then, okay, now look up. Look down left. Like, look every direction, do every possible face. They're creating like a system to be able to best recognize emotions and what your face looks like during every emotion. It's just more data to feed to Skynet in order to better understand people and to better understand how your face looks. They took a voice print, which is that thing that I just read.
Mm-hmm.
That was what she had to say for the voice print. And that is basically just like, it's a super detailed recording of your voice to understand exactly. By the way, the app TikTok, which is controlled by the Chinese Communist Party, in the terms and conditions, any content that you submit on TikTok, they have the right to take your voice print. So American children that are on TikTok and posting videos, their voice prints are owned by the Chinese Communist Party too. Legally, it's in the terms and conditions.
Wow.
I was so annoyed recently. I had my computer restarted. When I reinstalled the latest version of Windows, it comes with TikTok pre-installed. Pre-installed. Who the
TikTok?
TikTok is pre-installed on Windows now. It's nuts.
Well,
it's Chinese spyware, and it's pre-installed on Microsoft.
It's like public open Chinese spyware. It's not even like man, did you hear it could be Chinese spyware? It's like
it is.
China was like, hey America, you want some spyware? And we were like,
is it?
Yeah.
Please. Is it funny? Is it funny spyware?
Does it lie to me and tell me I have 1 billion fans? I have 1 trillion views on every video? Does it give me fake numbers that make me feel happy?
Deal.
Deal. I'm
you
down.
Got yourself a deal. They take voice prints. They take blood. So a cop has to try and take Mason's blood. He absolutely misses the vein because he's a cop. He doesn't know how to draw blood. And they end up just pricking her finger and dripping it into something instead. That's how they end up taking
Definitely
blood.
lead with that. That is a way easier way to get a blood sample.
I guess he just probably wants practice. Eventually it would be more efficient if he could do it the other way. So
nice.
Why don't you practice on every person?
Right.
After taking all those things, the police officer showed her on the system where she was ranked untrustworthy. There are 3 rankings at this point in Mason's story. There's
trustworthy, untrustworthy, and terrorist. You must die.
No, average. Average is the middle one. So untrustworthy is the bad one.
Ooh.
So she is deemed untrustworthy, and that seems to be because she has traveled at this point. She's been to Turkey, so she's been outside of the country. And Turkey is a Muslim majority country.
Mm-hmm.
So that makes her untrustworthy because she may have been infected with a mind virus while she was abroad. Because of that, she is told that she has to take twice weekly civics classes, which are propaganda courses where she has to go sit there for all day.
All day, twice a week?
I believe it was 8 hours. Yeah.
Wow.
3 hours of which was an intense interrogation about her beliefs and ideas and the things that she's learned. Just everything about what she thinks.
So I imagine those interviews are a bit clinical. So talk to me about what you think. Oh, well, that's problematic.
I'm going to reach a little bit. One of these here. Okay, I guess I think there was 2 different things she had to go to every week, but every Monday, police interrogated her for 3 hours on her ideology. Why did you choose to travel to the Middle East? An interrogator asked her. Typically, 3 officers sat at a desk in the room, asking questions and punching her answers into their computers. I'm doing a master's degree, she explained. It's for my education. Education, I see, said the interrogator. What kind of education do you seek? It's just social science. What would you do with social science? What sort of separatist views are you harboring? Another interrogator chimed in. People who know you say you like to read books. You've been a reader since a young age. Why would a woman like you read so many books? Week after week, the interrogations and classes continued. They asked the same questions over and over, worded differently, until Mason was exhausted from all the psychological mind games. I told you I'm a student. What sort of extremists have you had contact with in the Middle East? None! But the police, Mason later learned, were in fact gathering as much data as they could on her from her interrogations and classes in order to predict her future behavior. She and dozens of other Uyghurs told the same story. So many other people were having these exact same conversations.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we're reading Maysim's story here, it is also probably an amalgamation of some other stories as well. I'm not entirely sure, but yeah. So she has to do those classes all the time. One day, Miss Gurr comes to the house and she says, her family, it seems like, is fairly wealthy. They're a fairly well-to-do family. They have a second, summer home that they were on vacation at. She was approached by, this would not be Miss Gurr, this would be a police officer. She was approached by a police officer who said, "Hi, we've heard reports that your house on the inside is painted light blue." And she's like, "Yeah, so?" Light blue is, of course, a color that's closely associated with the Uyghur independence movement. That you can't have your house that color. You should paint it red, a good party color. So they have to, that day, go find red paint and paint the inside of their house, everything, red, instead of light blue. Because light blue is Uyghur independence.
That is a horrible color. You gotta make the inside of your house red?
God, that's terrible. Every wall red?
Red?
That would drive you insane.
And we're talking about bright red Chinese flag red.
Red. This chair red.
I can only see black from our muscles.
Right. I barely see
I don't know if there's red on the Chinese flag either. I mean, it's not on the top of that chair.
Your chair is way more red than mine.
Yeah, I have a redder chair.
That's no fair. Yeah. So they have to paint their house. They have to change the color because it's offensive. One day they come to the main house. Miss Gurr comes to the main house, and she says, "Because of your rating, we're saying, in order to show your trustworthiness, it's not force. In order to show your trustworthiness, you should install a camera in your house. You should install a camera in your living room." So they have to, on their own dime, go find the camera that Miss Gurr wants her to buy, which are very much sold out because this shit is happening all over the place. So they have to look around to find the right web camera that they want them to have and install it in their house, pay to have it installed in their house, pay a Chinese Communist Party guy to link it to the Chinese Communist system. Now they've got a camera in their living room that is watching and listening to them at all times. By the way, also a total 1984 thing. In every house, there's these screens. There's screens with cameras that you can't turn off. You can't turn off the screen. It's broadcasting propaganda whenever you want. They're not doing that yet, but I'm sure we'll get there. But they forced them to install a camera in their house, which Maysim said was the worst thing of it all. Because up to that point, at least I had a base. At least I had somewhere where I could speak freely. And me and my mom could have a conversation honestly about the situation. Which is the word that generally they use. That is the sort of neutral word that they use to refer to what is going on right now, is the situation.
Mm-hmm.
So they could have honest conversations when they were in their home. Now, the Chinese Communist Party is in their home with them and is watching them at all times as a constant feed to their house. So when they instead just end up sitting in the living room, doing nothing, just sort of having conversations that mean nothing. Because any sort of real conversation about what's going on is going to get them in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually, Miss Gurr comes again and says that she needs to go see the police again. When she gets to the police station, an SUV picks her up, takes her to the police station. When she gets to the police station, she sees many of her other classmates there, people that she's known from school, people her age. And they are told that they have been selected for a re-education class. Effective immediately, we're going to take you somewhere where you will spend a month learning to be a good member of the party because you've been ranked untrustworthy in some way. So she then immediately has to go with them, and she drives across town to what is an old remodeled house. And in the house, they're doing re-education classes. So just propaganda classes all the time. And there's other women there that are going through the same thing that are further along. And the people there are very they're brainwashing classes. What it is. So anyone that is successful there, anyone that wants to get out of there, you sit up straight and you either have no emotion on your face or just kind of pleasant look on your face, and you stand up and you boldly say the party lines that would make your teacher happy.
Oh God, you gotta sell it.
You have to sell it, yeah. And so there are teachers there that are just government teachers, and they teach you propaganda, and you have to agree with it. When she gets there, before they even start taking classes, the teacher says, "This room is very dirty. We need to clean it. Someone should clean the windows. You look like you're the youngest. You should go outside and clean the windows." And she was like, "Aren't I here to take civics classes? Why am I cleaning? What do you mean?" And she gets brought to a man that's in charge there at the house, who sort of shits on her and says, like, "What, you think you're better than this?" Like, and is very mean to her and tells her that she's going to learn a lesson. And he puts her back in an SUV, and she is taken to a different place. She's taken across town again, over to what is a remodeled high school. This remodeled high school they refer to as a detention center. And so she's now at the detention center so that she can learn. It's just a more intensive, with no end cap, re-education system for people that end up misbehaving more seriously than she did before, which was, not at all. She did nothing wrong. But she's brought to this detention center where it is not clear how long she is there, although it sounds like it may have been a couple weeks, something like that. He's unclear about the timeline for obvious reasons. The detention center has propaganda all over the walls, those sort of like paintings of like happy Han women, miserable Muslim women. That's all over the place. She ends up almost immediately talking back to a guard about something, just giving some little bit of attitude in some way. And he says something like, "What, you think you're better than me? Let's show this bitch who's boss." And they then like drag her out to a courtyard. I think they hit her a bit. And then they took her shoes and they made her sit in what is called the tiger chair. The tiger chair is a metal chair out in the sun in the middle of the courtyard where she has to sit, and she is strapped in, so your feet and your hands are strapped in and you're told not to move at all. This results in like your blood pooling in certain places. It results in sunburns because you're on this hot chair in the hot sun. And the creepiest thing about this is that while she's sitting in the tiger chair, there are several other women around whose job is just to stare at her with just dead faces. There's just creepy, blank-faced, watching women that are there just to apparently make her more uncomfortable, show her what she's going to be, something like that. She has to sit.
This is hell at this point. This is hell.
She sits in this chair for 8 hours. After that, she is told to stand up and put her hands straight up in the air and to stand like that for as long as they say. And they have there's 2 guards behind her with these big rubber batons with the spikes on them. And they say, "You know what'll happen if you move." And so she stands there for 3 hours with her hands straight up in the air, because if she doesn't, they're going to beat the shit out of her. One story that, after that, she's taken to like her bedroom, which is like a bunk. There's a bunch of beds around the room, which she's sharing this room with a bunch of other women. The shit bucket is right next to her bed, so it just smells like shit and piss all night. And if the women have to go to the bathroom with permission, they can go shit in the bucket. It's right there. She just has to deal with that. At one point, a woman is brought in. They hold these rooms close to the rooms of other people, as though they want to hear the screams of other. They want you to hear the screams of other people nearby. They want that sort of to be scary. There's a story of an old woman and her 2 sons that gets brought in, and the woman can hear that her sons are being beat up in the other room. They're men. They're older men. They were brought in for the crime of having too many children. They got caught with having 2 or 3 kids. The sons did. And so she's listening to her sons getting beaten in the other room, and she's like freaking out and wanting it to stop. And then she has a heart attack and goes unconscious, and Mazem is like yelling for the guards, like, this woman's having a heart attack, you have to help her. And they open the door and they go, oh, we've seen this before, everyone tries to fake it, and they shut the door. Eventually they take her out of the room, and she is presumed dead. She presumably died of that heart attack right there. And they just pretended that they didn't believe it, or it didn't matter. But she died listening to her sons getting beat right in the other room. In the morning, they have to do stretches. They do this calisthenics stretching thing. And at the same time, they're being told to repeat. Now stretch to the right, stretch to the left, hold. Repeat after me. Love our chairman, Xi Jinping. Love the Communist Party. Let us free ourselves of the viruses in our minds. The prisoners repeated the phrase, and the announcer went on. Let us purify the mind, cleanse ourselves of ideological viruses. We must all be good patriots who love our country. So they just have to repeat that shit all the time. This is... I just saw this as I was flipping. I didn't even have this highlighted, but it is truly one of the most insane brainwashing exercises. A big part of this detention center is that they are taught classes. They are brought to classes just like at the re-education place. And in one class, the teacher says to them, "You all have sharp minds. You're smarter than all those other people still out on the streets. You've all been overseas. That's why our great nation brought you here. I am so proud to meet all of you every day because I can see your intelligence. Now, let's try an exercise." The teacher placed 2 water bottles on the desk. One was empty and one was full. "I say the full water bottle is full of water. I also think the empty bottle is full of water. What do you think?" One student raised his hand and stood up. "Both water bottles are full." "Good." So they're like literally being asked to say shit that is provably untrue, which is also a big part of the brainwashing exercises in 1984, is like getting people to just say what is untrue because what the party says is more true than what reality says. When they're sleeping, when they're in their rooms, you are not allowed to, you don't make a mess of your bed has to stay tidy, even when you are sleeping in it, which means that like laying down in the bed isn't even a feasible thing. What women end up doing is they end up sitting against the wall with their feet straight out, neatening up the blanket over them, and just sleeping like this, sitting up, because that's the only way that you can not mess up your bed while you're asleep.
Jeez.
At one point, they tell Mazem and the other women that she is rooming with, I guess. They're told them that you have a period now for a half-hour nap. Mazem tries to go to sleep and can't, and the guards get angry at her and say that like, "What, you're ungrateful? Everyone stand up, she's ungrateful. All of you stand with your arms out for an hour." And so they just punished her and the whole group because she wasn't tired. And so everybody was punished for that. I guess meaning that they expect you to pretend to be asleep.
Damn.
After the guards leave the room and Mazem's like, "Guys, I'm sorry, I didn't mean for that to happen." And one of the women is like, "Don't worry about it. It doesn't matter. Today they said it was that. Tomorrow they're going to find a hair on the ground. They'll punish us for whatever. It's irrelevant." So it is comforting to know that in some cases these people are not truly brainwashed. They are pretending. Some of these people are pretending. It's hard to know how many of them are pretending or how many of them are not, because it looks exactly the same. On one of her first days there, she is brought out to the courtyard where she and this group of women, they line up and they're told they're going to do a lap around the courtyard to the finish line. They run, and when they get to the finish line, on the ground, on a plate, is moldy bread. And then they say, now we will decide the winners. And then they name off a list of who they thought hustled the hardest or whatever. Like, it wasn't even based on finishing. It was based on, like, who was trying the hardest. And then the winners got a piece of moldy bread and some cloudy water. And Maisam refused to partake in it. She assumed that there was something wrong. They did something to the water. She didn't know what, but they did something to it.
Mm-hmm.
She has to take all of these classes. In one class, a religious leader comes. This time, a man claiming to be a religious leader entered the classroom. Maisam braced herself for another bizarre propagandistic ramble. None of you realize what religion really means, what Islam means, he told them. Praying, fasting, none of this is suitable for modern life in our great nation. We are the surgeons who operate on your brains, your ideology. Your minds are poisoned. Now we will give you medicine. You must be grateful to our great nation for this medicine. Maisam was about to roll her eyes again, but remembered the cameras and the warning of the political officer that morning. Don't show emotion. Better to stay flat-faced, she thought. Wouldn't want my cellmates to get punished again because of me. Look at the typical Muslim village, the religious leader continued. The husband is a poor laborer. The woman doesn't work. The children don't go to school because they're held back by religion and poverty. It's your fault that you're here. Think about your families. Their lives were disrupted because you held the poison of ideology in your minds. You needed to come here to cleanse yourself. And now your families might be suffering because you are gone. Maybe they can't find a job. Maybe your kids had to stop school. It is your fault. It is your fault. You don't really know what religion really is. You don't know. You don't know. You really don't. At the end of the droning lecture, the students opened their notebooks and calmly began writing their 7-page summaries. After every class, you read a 7-page summary of the class. You have 1 hour. The religious leader called on one student to present his writings. I regret the wrong life I have lived, the student announced. Thank you to the party. You gave me everything. You are like my parents. You are my father and my mother in one. You are the sun. You are the moon. You are the mountains. I don't believe in heaven or hell. You are my only heaven. I will only follow you. Please lead me forever so I may find the way. That's the kind of shit that they end up just having to say. Because that's what they want to hear. Here's another class. There is a man named Ilham Tohti. Ilham Tohti is a teacher, a very popular professor that she had met a few times. She had not taken a class from him, although she had sat in on a few classes, and she had met him. And he was a powerful anti-fascist voice, anti-authoritarian voice. And he frequently knew that he was in danger. And there's kind of a story about him in here, about him trying to get his daughter out of the country and successfully getting his daughter out of the country in time. But
I spaced out for a second, traumatized by the brainwashing story. Does this guy have a name yet?
Ilham Tohti.
Ilham Tohti. Okay.
Ilham Tohti. In my head, I imagined him as like a Uyghur Jordan Peterson. That's who I thought of. He's a brave and open-minded, truthful man who just says what he believes to be the truth. And before I get to the topic, what is said about him in the class, I'm going to say what he said in 2013 when he was on the radio. There is a lot of tension around here. Tohti, speaking from China on July 24th, 2013, told a reporter from Radio Free Asia, a non-profit exile news service in D.C. In the past few days, I have been under constant surveillance by police vehicles and national security police officers. I have realized that I don't have too many good days ahead of me, and have a feeling that they may not have the best intentions in dealing with my situation. Therefore, I feel that it is necessary for me to leave a few words behind before I no longer have the ability to do so. If I do pass away in the near future, know that it is not because of natural illness, and it certainly will not be suicide. If I say anything that deviates from my morals after my arrest, know that those are not my words. Regardless of the interrogation strategy or the torture method, regardless of what body parts I am about to lose, know that I will never speak words that will work against the interest of Uyghurs, nor will I ever betray the Uyghurs. I have relied only on pen and paper to diplomatically request the human rights, legal rights, and autonomous regional rights for the Uyghurs. However, I have never pursued a violent route, and I have never joined a group that utilized violence. So, he was a powerful voice in that he was honest and supportive of the Uyghurs, and he was considered dangerous to the Chinese Communist Party, obviously. And Maisem, she had talked about him a bit earlier in the book, and she just loves this man. She thinks the world of him. He's her hero.
Mm-hmm.
And so now she's in the detention center, and today the topic is him. At some point every day, the teacher would show propaganda videos of patriotic students marching in formation and random people in the street praising China or standing before the Chinese flag. They were generally utterly featureless, but one day the teacher showed a documentary that included a face Maisem recognized. It was my professor Ilham Tohti. Ilham Tohti, who has been sentenced to life in prison, is a terrorist and extremist, Maisem recalled the documentary saying. The video showed Tohti in handcuffs, standing before a judge and receiving his sentence. Ilham Tohti used his position as a professor to infiltrate our nation and infect the minds of our students and people. The party stands against enemies such as Ilham Tohti, who are a cancer for the nation. Then the film showed a series of interviews with Professor Tohti's former students. Maisem was taken aback. She knew them from the time she audited his class. I studied under Ilham Tohti, said one student, a man in a polo shirt. I quickly realized that Professor Tohti was a terrorist who had infiltrated our minds. Now that I'm at a re-education center, the party is teaching me to cleanse my mind of Ilham Tohti's virus. The three viruses of terrorism, extremism, and separatism once existed within me, proclaimed another student. The virus was spreading, thanks to Professor Ilham Tohti. But the party cured me. The party set me on the right course. Love the party, love the country, down with the scoundrel Ilham Tohti. One by one, the students in the documentary denounced their professor. Once it was over, the teacher told the class to begin the old routine, open their notebooks and write 7 pages of reflections on Ilham Tohti. I have reflected on the teachings of the party, Maisem wrote. I was wrong. The party is great. The nation is great. Reactionary intellectuals have infiltrated our nation to infect my mind and soul. The party is my father and mother, and the party has corrected me. She was tired. She just wanted to go home. So nothing. So that's very, very dark. One other thing that she had to do while she was at this detention center was she was brought before 2 tables. On one table, there's a model house and trees and bushes and green yard. And she has to arrange the house and the yard and the bushes and the trees in a way that makes sense. She arranges it. On the other table, there is an AK-47 and a grenade. And she is told to arrange them in a way that looks right. She has no idea what the fuck that means, because how do you make an AK-47 and a grenade correctly arranged on a table? There's no way, and she was just like, I don't know what to do. The way that worked was anybody who touched them and attempted to move them around was showed that they were comfortable touching weapons, and they received a day of solitary confinement and then had to take the test again. So the trick was, don't touch the gun, don't touch the grenade. That's the way out of it.
Damn.
This whole time, the whole time that Maisam is in the detention center, her mom is on a mission to get her out. Her mom does have some connections. Her husband is reasonably well connected in the party. He's reasonably high ranking. But she basically pulls all the strings she can, and at one point visits Maisam while she's in there and like gives her a little bit of advice on how to deal with this situation. It's not clear that she actually helps all that much. It's kind of implied Maisam feels that she did, because like not long after Maisam's mother visited, she was allowed to leave the detention center. Their mother was telling like the people running it that like this was some sort of mistake. She comes from a good family. This can't be right. And eventually they decided to let her out of there. However, they don't take her home. Now you need to go to the re-education center to do your month of re-education. So the original place that she was at.
Oh my god.
So they take her, she thinks she's going home, and then they take her to the re-education. They're like, now you can resume your re-education. That's all she's been doing for weeks now. And so now she has to go back to the re-education center, and she then spends a month doing more of this shit in a slightly less constrictive environment. Eventually, she gets out of there as well. She passes her classes and shows that she is trustworthy. Her mother knows that things are only going to get worse. And she was supposed to go back to school months ago. And they've had to reschedule her flight several times because she's been taken by Daesh. She's been kidnapped for months. So her mother has been spending the whole time that she's in there doing everything she can to cross all the T's, dot all the I's, in order to make sure that she has all the paperwork necessary to get her back out of the country again and get her back to school, where she hopes she will never return. So her mother is trying to get her out of the country, and she gets all the paperwork together, and they get their flight, and when she takes Maisam to the airport, they say that you never got government approval for the reschedulings, like the many times that they had to reschedule the flight while she was like, there was just another bureaucratic bullshit document that like, why would I have known to do that? So she's not allowed on her flight, and instead her mom ends up driving her to the border of Egypt and gets her, like, it's the way it's described, it is like a risk, like there's a good chance that they're going to reject her there, but she ends up getting through to Egypt, and then through Egypt she escapes to Turkey, where she eventually meets Geoffrey Cain and tells this story. Her mother and father have to stay behind. Maisam gets out, and she does have a little bit of contact with her mom a few times, mostly through the WeChat app, which leads to her mom and dad end up being arrested because they're communicating with her daughter, and then there's like this woman that she kind of knew from Kashgar, who's reaching out to her and like, your mother and father are doing very well in the re-education. When will you be coming home? And it's just like it's all friendly. It's the face is friendly,
of course, but
behind that is very sinister. It's like, come home or we're going to kill your parents. But it's like, your mother and father are doing very well in the education center. We're so looking forward to your return. When will you be coming home? And they're like trying to get her to spy on people. They're like trying to make her a spy in Turkey. And they're trying to pinpoint her location, trying to figure out like where exactly she is so that they can go get her.
Damn.
I believe it sounds like she is now in the United States pursuing.
Fuck yeah.
Yeah. So I think she's here now, at least as of the publishing of this book, which was, I believe, March. So it's a very recent book. But things are just getting worse there. Like, it's not getting better. And Maisam luckily got out, but her family is, I mean, they're probably dead. They're probably dead by now. And, like, the government will probably say that it's her fault. What Maisam never had to deal with was sort of the next level of that is the vocational training centers. They are slave labor camps. So many of the people, if they can't behave properly or if they just need more people, are ending up at these places where they teach you vocational skills like making shoes. So they're being used as slave labor in these camps, and it's being presented as it's totally voluntary because they all have to sign a thing when they go in. Now I'm going to shame a list of companies that are employing the slave labor of the Uyghur Muslim camps in Xinjiang.
Please do.
Calvin Klein, Tommy Hilfiger, Gap, Dell, LG, HP, Mercedes-Benz, Volkswagen, Adidas, Nike, Apple, and Amazon.
Jesus.
Those companies have all been busted for using the slave labor of the Uyghur camps. And of course, when they get caught, they're like, "Oh no, we had no idea that these were bad working conditions. We were told that everything was above board and these were all voluntary workers. We didn't know that there was anything going on." So all those companies, Calvin Klein, Tommy Hilfiger, Gap, Dell, LG, HP, Mercedes-Benz, Volkswagen, Adidas, Nike, Apple, Amazon. Within the last 2 years, they have been using modern-day slaves to produce their products. So if you can handle it, you shouldn't support them because they're monsters. And there's one more quote that I wanted to read here. As we spoke in Ankara in November 2019, 3 years after her internment, Maysom picked up a copy of 1984. This man was so smart. How could an Englishman write a book 70 years ago that predicted my experience? War is peace, freedom is slavery, ignorance is strength, she recited, repeating the mantra of the fictional nation of Oceania. These words were so intelligent. George Orwell saw the future. He saw our world, the world of the Uyghur people. He writes about the strategy of Newspeak. Newspeak has been used by all kinds of authoritarian governments, I said. What makes the Uyghurs different? Technology. We've had many authoritarian governments since 1984 was published in June 1949, Mason explained. The Soviet Union, Mao's China, North Korea, the Iron Curtain. But what sets this apart is that our technology is finally good enough to mimic science fiction books, down to the exact technologies that the old authors thought would happen. When you combine the technology with the old authoritarian tactics, everything that Orwell talked about, the Newspeak, the big screens that showed party propaganda, the harsh punishments and concentration camps, and the constant monitoring of a population are suddenly amplified. Back then, those leaders used force and violence to repress their people. Today, with technology, they don't need violence like they used to. They can control a population, brainwash its people, and strip them of their humanity to become subservient. Like a panopticon, I asked, recalling the term other Uyghurs and experts in authoritarianism had used to describe their regime. A panopticon meaning like a prison where there is a guard tower that can see everything at all times, but you're not sure where he's looking at the time. Exactly, she said. But in the old days, you needed a human guard for the panopticon. Humans can doze off, make mistakes, maybe show a little compassion. It's an imperfect system. In our new world of artificial intelligence, the stakes are so much higher. We don't always understand how a machine comes to conclusions about people. You could be late to class one day, and a machine will watch you through the camera, and somehow, with all the data it's gathered from the entire country, it'll conclude you're about to rob someone. Then the police will sweep in and detain you under predictive policing. But the police, I learned, aren't always thinking about what they're doing. Their job is to take orders, and once we humans resign from critical thinking, we're in trouble. That was all the notes that I had. So it's a very dark situation, and it's far more advanced than I would have expected it to be when going into the book. It's extremely high-tech, and people are dying. Oh man, nope. I have one more thing. There have been some people within the Chinese Communist Party that have been whistleblowers and leakers to leak certain things, and there have been some things that ended up being databases that were accidentally publicly available. In the data on the women Uyghurs, there was a box for whether or not they are breed ready. I think it seems likely that what's going on here with the DNA and the blood tests and everything, this could very possibly be like organ harvesting. That kind of shit could be going on. Say you're a rich Saudi prince and you want a nice new kidney, and you've got a database of people to pick from. There's bound to be a match somewhere in there. The women are being marked breed ready if they want to be used as a surrogate or something. But they've got a database of all the health information of all of these people, and it feels very likely that it's something like that going on. And I didn't mention this, but many of the Uyghur women are being taken to camps where they are being sterilized. They're being fixed so that they can't have children. And the women that aren't being fixed, they are being given mandatory birth control pills at noon. The Uyghur birth rate has dropped to almost nothing at this point. So it's basically a genocide going on because there's not going to be any more of them if things keep going this way. What China's doing is very bad. Xi Jinping is very bad. And all these companies that are doing business with slave labor are very bad. And it's crazy how obvious this propaganda is. It's crazy how transparent it is. It's crazy how stupid it is. Like these lines, I love the party, I love the country, they are my mother and my father, they are everything to me. It's just it's so obvious bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
And Mason describes that this whole thing, it happened little by little. That it started with a few cameras in the name of safety, and the people that were making it felt that they were fighting crime. There's a man who worked on Skynet who was interviewed, and he talks about how he felt he was fighting crime, and he felt good about what he was doing. He didn't realize he was building the prison he was going to live in. That's what he was doing. And it happened little by little, and Mason felt that not enough people spoke up early on when they started seeing the small signs happening.
Mm-hmm.
And I suppose we need to keep that in mind, because those small things, they are happening. We do see some of those, and it feels
like everyone knowing that the CIA and the NSA can access any of our webcams at any moment and record
we'll just accept that.
We're just yeah, I guess they do, huh?
Yeah, and it's fucked up, and we do need to be calling out those things when they happen, and because it feels so far-fetched that this could happen here. It really does. But it happened there, and those are humans too, and who's to say it couldn't?
Guns.
That's for sure. For sure, that's very helpful.
Who's to say it couldn't? Guns. Guns are to say it couldn't.
Yeah. China is also expanding their safe city program, so a lot of these things are being rolled out to the rest of their country.
Right.
And I haven't looked into this, but it mentioned near the end of the book that there are many cities that have signed on to attempt certain safe city protocols.
Damn.
Oh, and I also wanted to shame one more company, Thermo Fisher Dynamics. They're a U.S.-based company that they are handling all this DNA testing for the Chinese Communist Party.
Wow.
So shame on you, Thermo Fisher Dynamics. I suppose it feels kind of good to know that this is happening, to be aware, because it is their plan is transparent if you kind of look at it from this sort of perspective. So it's good that we know it, and it feels beatable. It feels like this could be stopped before it expanded to be a worldwide thing.
But it's really, really intimidating coming from China.
Yeah.
Because China is the leading nation.
Feels that way.
Because it used to be, if there were blatant human rights violations, that was our thing.
Mm-hmm.
We're gonna fuck you up.
Yeah.
That's not a thing anymore. Like China is doing this, and then they're looking at us. They're like, "What?" We're like, "Nothing."
We're like, "More business, please."
Yeah. So that's really, really intimidating.
Yeah. But the more you know.
Yeah. Better to know. Horrifying. Do you know of any what are the independent press and media organizations that we should be donating to?
I don't know of any.
Okay.
Like, as in ones that are covering this?
Like you mentioned, the press organization that what's-his-face, main character's hero, worked for. What was it?
Oh, no, that was a radio station that he did an interview on in 2013.
Oh, okay, so they weren't, like, gung-ho about exposing this stuff.
I don't believe so, no. I don't know anything about them. That was the only mention of them. I don't know of any organizations that are like fighting this particularly hard. I don't know of anyone, but we should support China and all of these companies as little as possible, because they're ruining the world.
Yeah,
and they're killing people, and maybe even worse, they're making people not people. They're like taking away their peoplehood.
Yeah,
and that might be worse.
Yeah.
Got any other comments or questions?
No.
That's cool.
That's cool.